For generations, gospel music has lifted hearts, healed wounds, and united communities through faith, harmony, and hope. Yet behind some of its most powerful voices were deeply personal challenges that were rarely spoken aloud. In an era when illness, stigma, and misunderstanding cast long shadows over entire communities, many artists carried private battles that the public never fully knew. And as we reflect on their contributions today, we also acknowledge the quiet resilience, humanity, and complexity that shaped their lives. This is not a story of tragedy, but a story of courage, creativity, and the unbreakable spirit behind 15 legendary figures whose influence shaped gospel forever. Thomas Whitfield. The maestro whose music rewrote gospel excellence. Thomas Whitfield, affectionately known as the Maestro, transformed contemporary gospel through his extraordinary arrangements, lush harmonies, and emotionally charged compositions that blended classical techniques with Pentecostal fire. And, although his life ended far too soon in 1992, his impact remains immeasurable as choirs still rehearse his songs, musicians still study his arrangements, and congregations still feel the emotional weight of pieces like "I Shall Wear a Crown" and "We Need a Word from the Lord." Yet behind his brilliance was a quiet personal journey, shaped by the pressures of fame, health, and an era when many private struggles, especially those involving illness, remained tucked behind closed doors, leaving his legacy not only a testament to musical genius, but a reminder of how many artists bore burdens they felt unable to share. Keith Pringle, a voice of power, passion, and hidden pain. Keith Pringle's soaring tenor electrified churches across America as he led the Pentecostal community choir with unmatched conviction and contagious spiritual energy, and his classics like "There's a Praise in This House" and "No Greater Love" remain staples of Sunday worship even today. Yet behind his bold stage presence, Pringle lived with challenges he rarely discussed publicly, reflecting the climate of a time when many felt pressure to maintain silence around personal battles. And while the details of his life remain private, what stands tall is his gift, the sound of a man who poured every ounce of strength, feeling, and faith into music that continues to uplift long after his passing. Ronald Winans, the quiet anchor of a legendary family. Ronald Winans, often overshadowed by his more visible siblings in the legendary Winans family, was a vocal anchor whose rich baritone brought depth, warmth, and sincerity to the group's harmonies, marking him as both its foundation and its emotional center. And though he dealt with health issues throughout his life, his family protected his privacy, choosing to let his legacy speak through the songs he recorded, the souls he touched, and the ministry he supported. His passing in 2005 left a void in the gospel world, yet his contributions remain a permanent part of a dynasty that reshaped modern gospel. Darrell Coley, the master vocalist who sang through the storm. Darrell Coley, widely celebrated as one of the greatest male vocalists in gospel history, brought unmatched vocal range, improvisational brilliance, and spiritual depth to songs like "When the Music Stops." And while he was open about certain aspects of his health journey later in life, Coley's message was always rooted in hope, resilience, and faith, reminding listeners that personal challenges do not erase purpose. Despite facing years of illness before his passing in 2016, he performed, ministered, and inspired with a strength that made his life not a story of struggle, but of courage, transparency, and unwavering devotion to God. Sherman Hemsley, a beloved star with a quiet love for gospel. Sherman Hemsley, best known as George Jefferson on The Jeffersons, also held a deep, lifelong love for gospel music, and later in life he surprised fans by recording spiritually inspired work that reflected his softer, more introspective side, yet despite decades of fame, Hemsley remained intensely private about his personal life, health, and inner world. When he passed away in 2012, tributes focused not on unanswered questions, but on the joy he brought audiences, the quiet sincerity he brought to music, and the layers of humanity behind an iconic comedic performer who was far more than the characters he played. Tyrone Davis, a soul legend whose final chapter returned to faith. Tyrone Davis rose to mainstream fame with smooth R&B classics like Turn Back the Hands of Time. Yet in the later years of his life, he shifted closer to gospel roots, expressing spiritual themes with renewed clarity and emotional honesty. His health steadily declined leading up to his death in 2005, but those close to him described a man who turned inward, reconnected with faith, and embraced the opportunity to leave behind messages of reflection, grace, and growth, reminding the world that transformation is possible even in life's hardest chapters. Willie Mae Ford Smith, the matriarch who witnessed generational pain. Willie Mae Ford Smith, one of the earliest architects of gospel music, mentored Mahalia Jackson, inspired countless singers, and helped shape the sound of modern worship through her fiery vocals and pioneering teaching style. Yet beyond the pulpit, she also carried profound personal grief as illness and loss struck her extended family during the difficult decades of the late 20th century. While she herself lived a long life until 1994, Smith often spoke of the emotional toll of watching younger generations suffer silently in a time when many families felt unable to openly discuss health struggles, making her legacy not only musical, but deeply human. Andraé Crouch, a composer who changed worship worldwide. Andraé Crouch broke musical boundaries with crossover hits like Soon and Very Soon and The Blood Will Never Lose Its Power, collaborated with global icons from Michael Jackson to Quincy Jones, and shaped the modern sound of praise and worship. Throughout his life, he dealt with significant health challenges, including heart issues that contributed to his death in 2015. Yet Crouch remained transparent about the importance of compassion, understanding, and honesty, encouraging the church to embrace those dealing with illness rather than judge them, and his willingness to break silence helped advance conversations that many were afraid to start. Reverend William H. Gray III, a leader who served from pulpit to Congress. Reverend William H. Gray III balanced roles as a powerful pastor, a historic U.S. congressman, and an advocate for justice. And while he kept his personal medical history private during his lifetime, his family later chose transparency in the hope of reducing stigma and increasing awareness, allowing his story to become one of courage rather than secrecy. Gray's life remains a testament to public service, moral conviction, and the belief that true leadership means protecting and uplifting others, even when facing personal storms of your own. Billy Preston, a musical prodigy with a complex life. Billy Preston lived a life of astonishing musical achievement, playing with Mahalia Jackson at age 10, performing with the Beatles and Rolling Stones, shaping soul, rock, and gospel, and composing iconic hits like You Are So Beautiful. Yet behind his extraordinary career were years of private health struggles that became public only near his passing in 2006. Despite the challenges he faced, Preston continued to create, inspire, and blend gospel into mainstream music, proving that spirituality and artistry could coexist even in life's darkest moments. Teddy Pendergrass, a symbol of strength and reinvention. Teddy Pendergrass soared to fame as an R&B icon before a tragic 1982 accident left him paralyzed. Yet even from a wheelchair, he rebuilt his life, rediscovered faith, and embraced gospel influences with renewed passion. Although he faced serious health issues near the end of his life, leading to his passing in 2010, Pendergrass used his platform to advocate for disability awareness, emotional healing, and spiritual resilience, reminding the world that strength is not defined by circumstance, but by the determination to keep moving forward. Walter Hawkins, a pastor who built a sanctuary for the hurting bishop. Walter Hawkins revolutionized gospel through the Love Alive series and the Love Center Church, creating a spiritual home that welcomed artists, families, and individuals from all walks of life, especially during the difficult decades when illness and fear silently affected countless members of the gospel community. Though he died of pancreatic cancer in 2010, his legacy includes the compassion he extended to those battling unspoken struggles, the openness he fostered in worship spaces, and the belief that the church should be a refuge, not a place of judgment. Twinkie Clark, a living witness to loss and triumph. Elbernita Twinkie Clark, the creative genius behind the Clark sisters, has spoken openly about the many choir members and musicians she lost during the height of widespread illness in the 1980s and 1990s, offering rare transparency at a time when the church often avoided such conversations. Though she herself remains alive and active, Twinkie's role in preserving the memory of those who passed, and her insistence that their contributions be honored rather than erased, makes her a vital voice in understanding gospel's history, grief, and resilience. Rev. Donald V. Curlin, A Quiet Story of Love, Faith, and Grace. Reverend Donald Curlin's life became widely known only after his widow, Pastor Tamara Bennett, bravely shared the intimate truth of his health struggles in an effort to help others, turning their personal story into a ministry of healing, education, and compassion. Though his journey ended in 2000, Bennett's decision to speak openly about silence, fear, and forgiveness helped countless church members confront difficult topics with grace, reminding the world that love does not disappear in hardship. It deepens.